go into any more detail. I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my.
And I cannot go in the execution chamber and be executed under the devil. I have to come clean and cleanse my spirit in the name of Jesus Christ.
October 9th, 2002. 9:47 a.m. A woman lies strapped to a gurney inside Florida State Prison's execution chamber. In moments, she will become the 10th woman executed in America since 1976. Prison officials ask if she has any final words. What comes out of her mouth will haunt America forever. This is Aileen Wuornos, the prostitute who killed 7 men on Florida's highways, the woman Hollywood turned into an Oscar-winning film, the daughter nobody wanted, the abuse survivor who became one of America's most controversial killers. But here's the question that divided the nation. Was she a cold-blooded predator who murdered for money? Or was she a victim who finally fought back against male violence? Have you ever wondered what creates a killer? Not the Hollywood version, not the Netflix dramatization, but the real story, the one that starts long before the first murder, the one that begins with a child nobody protected. Because here's what nobody wants to admit. We don't just punish killers. Sometimes we create them. Between November 1989 and November 1990, just 12 months, Aileen Wuornos killed 7 men along the highways of Central Florida. All middle-aged, all shot with the same .22 caliber pistol, all robbed and left in remote locations. She claimed every single one of them tried to rape her. Prosecutors said she was lying. So who was telling the truth? Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear isn't just another true crime story. This is a case that will make you question everything you think you know about right and wrong, victim and perpetrator, justice and revenge. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever heard of Aileen Wuornos before today? Now let me take you back to where it all began. Not in 1989 when the first man died, but decades earlier. To a little girl born on a day that barely exists. To a childhood so horrific you'll understand why some people believe monsters aren't born. They're made. This is the story of Aileen Wuornos, the highway killer, the woman the world couldn't decide whether to pity or condemn. And by the end of this video, you'll have to make that choice for yourself. February 29th, 1956, Rochester, Michigan. Aileen Carol Wuornos is born on Leap Day, a date that only comes once every 4 years. It's almost symbolic, isn't it? A life that barely exists on the calendar. A child who would spend her entire existence feeling invisible. Her mother, Diane, was just 14 years old when she married Aileen's father, Leo Pittman. He was 18, a 14-year-old child bride. By the time Aileen entered the world, the marriage was already over. Diane filed for divorce 2 months before her daughter's birth. Aileen never met her father, not once. And maybe that was mercy. Leo Pittman wasn't just an absent father, he was a monster. In 1967, he was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old girl. Diagnosed as a schizophrenic, he spent his final years in mental hospitals before hanging himself in his prison cell in January 1969. Aileen inherited his name. And perhaps she inherited something darker, a genetic blueprint for violence and mental illness. The nature versus nurture debate would follow her to the grave. When Aileen was almost 4 years old, her mother made a choice that would destroy any chance at a normal life. Diane abandoned her children. She just walked away. Aileen and her older brother Keith were handed over to their maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos. In March 1960, the grandparents legally adopted them. For years, Aileen believed these people were her real parents. She didn't learn the truth until she was 11 years old. Can you comprehend that? Finding out at 11 that your entire life has been a lie? That the people you called mom and dad were actually your grandparents? That your real mother didn't want you? But the truth about her parents was just the beginning of the horror. Both grandparents were severe alcoholics. The house reeked of beer and dysfunction. But according to Aileen's later testimony, Her grandfather, Laurie, did something far worse than drink. He sexually abused her, repeatedly, throughout her childhood. Before he beat her, he would force her to strip naked, a ritual of humiliation before the violence. A little girl, powerless, subjected to unspeakable acts by the very person who was supposed to protect her. Child abuse doesn't just cause physical harm, it rewires the developing brain. Victims of childhood sexual abuse are at significantly higher risk for mental health disorders, addiction, and difficulty forming healthy relationships. The trauma doesn't just happen to them, it becomes part of who they are. By age 11, Aileen was already engaging in sexual activity at school. She would trade sex for cigarettes, drugs, and food. An 11-year-old child, already so damaged that she was using her body as currency for survival. Think about what that means. At an age when most kids are worried about homework and friendships, Aileen was being exploited by boys who gave her the nickname Cigarette Pig. She also had sexual contact with her brother Keith during this time. This wasn't normal childhood exploration. This was two traumatized children acting out the abuse that had been inflicted upon them. At 14, Aileen became pregnant. She was raped by a family friend, yet another man who should have protected her but instead violated her. On March 23, 1971, she gave birth to a boy at a home for unwed mothers. She was a child herself, giving birth to a child. The baby was immediately placed for adoption. Aileen never saw him again. Try to feel that loss. Carrying a baby for 9 months, giving birth, holding him for maybe a moment, then watching as they take him away forever. A few months later, her grandmother Britta died of liver failure, the alcoholism finally claiming her life. Her grandfather's response? He threw 15-year-old Aileen out of the house. Let that reality settle in. A 15-year-old girl, pregnant just months earlier, sexually abused throughout her childhood, with no education, no skills, no support system, is cast onto the streets like garbage. Aileen ended up living in the woods near her childhood home, completely alone. No money, no family, no options. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She sold her body to survive. The foundation of Aileen Wuornos was built on trauma, abandonment, and abuse. Every pillar that should have supported a healthy human being was cracked, broken, or missing entirely. Between the ages of 14 and 22, Aileen attempted to kill herself 6 times. 6 times she tried to escape the pain the only way she knew how. 6 times she failed to die. Her criminal record began early. May 27, 1974. Just 18 years old, Aileen was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. Remember that detail, a .22 caliber pistol. It will become important. In 1976, 20-year-old Aileen hitchhiked to Florida, searching for something she'd never had. A fresh start, a chance at normalcy, maybe even love. Instead, she met 69-year-old Louis Gratz Fell, president of a local yacht club. Wealthy, established, respectable. They married quickly. The announcement even appeared in the newspaper society pages. For a brief, shining moment, it looked like Aileen had escaped her past. The marriage lasted 9 weeks. Aileen's explosive temper made her impossible to live with. She got into constant fights at their local bar. She was arrested for assault. She even hit her elderly husband with his own cane. Within weeks, Fell got a restraining order against her. By July 21, 1976, their marriage was annulled. Just 3 days before that annulment, on July 17th, Aileen's brother Keith died of esophageal cancer. He was only 21 years old. Despite their troubled history, despite the fact that they had sexually abused each other as traumatized children, Keith was one of the few people who had been with Aileen from the beginning. One of the few people who knew what they'd survived. Now he was gone. Aileen received $10,000 from his life insurance policy. In 1976, that was substantial money. Adjusted for inflation, it's over $50,000 today. It should have been enough to change her life, to get therapy, to start fresh, to build something. She blew through it all in just 2 months. Luxuries, a new car that she wrecked almost immediately. The money disappeared like smoke, and with it, any chance of escape. The arrests continued. Armed robbery of a convenience store. She stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. Forged checks. Theft of a revolver. Car theft. Resisting arrest. She was imprisoned from May 1982 to June 1983 for armed robbery. Every time police searched her or her vehicle, they found weapons: a .38 caliber revolver, a .22 caliber pistol, ammunition. Her arrest records frequently noted attitude poor. Law enforcement described her as erratic, easily angered, volatile. Aileen was a walking powder keg. Everyone could see it, but nobody stopped her. Nobody. In 1986, something changed. At a gay bar called Zodiac in Daytona Beach, 30-year-old Aileen met a 24-year-old woman named Tyria Moore. Ty was a motel maid, quiet, unassuming. They fell in love. For the first time in her life, Aileen felt like someone actually wanted her. Not for sex, not for what she could provide, but for her. They moved in together, built a life together. At her trial years later, Aileen would say, "It was love beyond comprehension." Earthly words cannot describe how I felt about Tyria. Even before her execution, even after the ultimate betrayal, Aileen claimed she was still in love with Ty. When people have been starved of love their entire lives, they often attach intensely to the first person who shows them genuine affection. This attachment can become all-consuming. The fear of losing that love can drive people to desperate, dangerous decisions. Aileen supported them both through prostitution. Ty knew what Aileen did for money. She accepted it. They sold stolen items at pawn shops to supplement their income. It wasn't a fairy tale. But for Aileen, it was the closest thing to love she'd ever known. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below. Do you think love could have saved Aileen? If she'd found it earlier, if someone had shown her genuine care as a child, would 7 men still be alive today? Because what happened next would answer that question in the most horrific way possible. November 30th, 1989. That's the date everything changed. That's when Aileen Wuornos crossed a line she could never come back from. Her first victim was Richard Charles Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner from Clearwater, Florida. According to Aileen, here's what happened. Mallory picked her up on a rainy night. He offered her vodka and marijuana, but when she asked for beer instead, he bought it for her. They drove into a secluded wooded area. They talked. They drank. Eventually, they fell asleep in the car. When Aileen woke up, according to her testimony, Mallory had tied her to the steering wheel. He violently raped and sodomized her. He choked her with a cord. He squirted rubbing alcohol from a Visine bottle into her anus, vagina, and mouth. She said she feared for her life, so she grabbed her .22 caliber pistol, woke him up, and shot him multiple times. 2 bullets to the left lung caused his death. Self-defense. That was her story. A woman fighting back against a violent rapist. Prosecutors didn't believe her. They said she was lying, that it was cold-blooded murder for money. But here's where the story gets complicated. Years later, after Aileen's trial, investigators discovered something crucial, something that was never allowed as evidence in court. Richard Mallory had previously been convicted of attempted rape in Maryland. He had served 10 years in a maximum security facility for sex offenders. Medical records from 1961 noted that he had strong sociopathic trends. So was Aileen telling the truth? Did Mallory actually attack her? We'll never know for certain. But here's what we do know. Aileen never mentioned Mallory's criminal history during her confession. Tyria Moore said Aileen never told her about it, which means either Aileen didn't know, or she chose not to use this information to support her self-defense claim. The first act of violence is often the hardest. Once that psychological barrier is broken, subsequent acts become easier. This is true in war, in domestic abuse, and in serial murder. The first kill changes something fundamental in the human psyche. 2 days after the murder, police found Mallory's abandoned vehicle in Volusia County. On December 13th, his body was discovered several miles away in a wooded area. Aileen robbed him. She stole his car. She pawned his belongings. After Mallory, something inside Aileen broke completely. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was the realization that she'd gotten away with it. Maybe it was years of rage finally finding an outlet. Or maybe, and this is the terrifying possibility, maybe killing Mallory felt like justice. Like finally, after years of being victimized, she had taken power back. Whatever the reason, the killings didn't stop. They accelerated. In just 12 months, Aileen Wuornos killed 7 men. 7 men, all middle-aged, all killed along Florida's highways, all shot with the same .22 caliber pistol. May 19, 1990. David Andrew Spears, 47, construction worker. His naked body was found on June 1st along Highway 19 in Citrus County, shot 6 times in the torso. May 31st, 1990. Charles Edmund Carskadden, 40, part-time rodeo worker. His body was found on June 6th in Pasco County, wrapped in an electric blanket, shot 9 times. The body was so badly decomposed that identification took days. Witnesses later reported seeing Aileen driving his car. She had pawned a gun that belonged to him. June 1990. Peter Abraham Seams, 65, retired merchant seaman. He left Jupiter, Florida, heading to Arkansas. He never arrived. On July 4th, his car was found abandoned in Orange Springs, Florida. Aileen's handprint was discovered on the interior door handle. Peter Seams's body was never found. July 31st, 1990. Troy Eugene Burris, 50, sausage salesman from Ocala. His body was found on August 4th in a wooded area along State Road 19, shot twice. September 11th, 1990. Charles Richard Humphreys, 56. This victim was different. Humphreys was a retired United States Air Force major, a former state child abuse investigator, and a former chief of police. His body was found the next day, fully clothed, shot 7 times in the head and torso. A man who had dedicated his career to protecting abused children, shot dead by a woman who had been one of those children. November 19, 1990. Walter Gino Antonio, 62, trucker, security guard, and reserve police officer. His nearly naked body was found near a remote logging road in Dixie County, shot 4 times. 5 days later, his car was found in Brevard County. 7 men in 12 months. The pattern was unmistakable. All were picked up along Florida's highways. All were driven to remote locations. All were shot multiple times with a .22 caliber pistol. All were robbed. All had their vehicles stolen. After each murder, Aileen would pawn their belongings, cameras, tools, jewelry. Each time, she had to leave a thumbprint on the pawn shop receipt. She was leaving a trail of evidence, breadcrumbs leading straight to her. On July 4th, 1990, something happened that would ultimately lead to her arrest. Aileen and Tyria were driving Peter Seams's stolen car when they crashed it in Orange Springs, Florida. A witness named Rhonda Bailey saw the whole thing. She watched 2 women abandon the vehicle and flee the scene on foot. Bailey gave police detailed descriptions of both women. Police launched a massive media campaign. Composite sketches of the 2 women were everywhere, on television, in newspapers, on wanted posters. Meanwhile, investigators were connecting the dots. Victims' belongings kept showing up in pawn shops across Florida, and on those pawn receipts, thumbprints, Aileen's thumbprints. Her handprint was found on Peter Seam's car door. She already had a criminal record in Florida, so her prints were in the system. Police now had a name, a face, a location. The net was closing. January 9th, 1991. Police arrested Aileen at a biker bar called The Last Resort in Volusia County. They used the pretense of an outstanding warrant under an alias she'd been using, Lori Grody. Aileen had no idea they were connecting her to 7 murders. The next day, police found Tyria Moore in Pittston, Pennsylvania, staying with her family. This is where everything changes. This is where love dies. Police offered Tyria a deal, full immunity from prosecution. She wouldn't be charged with anything. Not as an accomplice, not for the stolen goods they'd sold, nothing. All she had to do was help them get Aileen to confess. Tyria agreed. The woman Aileen loved more than anything. The woman she had killed for. The woman she had supported through prostitution for years. The woman who was the only person who had ever made her feel wanted. Betrayed her completely. Police brought Ty back to Florida and put her up in a motel. Under their careful guidance, she made phone call after phone call to Aileen in jail. In those recorded conversations, Ty begged Aileen to confess. She pleaded with her to tell the truth so that Ty's name could be cleared. "I'm scared, Lee. I'm so scared they're going to come after me. Please, just tell them the truth for me. Please." Aileen, desperate to protect the woman she loved, desperate to save Ty from prosecution, did exactly what they wanted. 3 days later, on January 16, 1991, Aileen Wuornos confessed to all 7 murders. She told police that the men had tried to rape her and that she killed them in self-defense. When people face their own destruction, loyalty often crumbles. The person you would die for may not be willing to sacrifice anything for you. Self-preservation is one of the most powerful human instincts. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Someone you thought would stand by you no matter what? Drop your story in the comments. Sometimes sharing helps us process these experiences. There's one more twist to this story, something that shows just how broken Aileen's life had always been. In November 1991, a 44-year-old born-again Christian woman named Aileen Wuornos saw Aileen's photo in a newspaper. Prala had never met Aileen. They had no connection whatsoever. But Prala felt called by God to help her. She legally adopted Aileen. For the first time in her life, at 35 years old, Aileen Wuornos had a mother, but it was too late. The state of Florida was preparing to put her on trial for murder. January 14, 1992, Aileen Wuornos went to trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory. The prosecution had a powerful weapon, Florida's Williams Rule. This rule allowed them to introduce evidence from all of Aileen's other murders to establish a pattern of criminal behavior. The jury would hear about all 7 killings, not just Mallory's. Tyria Moore took the stand as the prosecution's star witness. The woman Aileen loved testified against her, described their relationship, confirmed Aileen's access to weapons, corroborated the timeline. The betrayal was complete. Defense psychiatrists examined Aileen. They diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. They assessed her using the psychopathy checklist. She scored 32 out of 40, above the cutoff of 30 for psychopathy. Her IQ was measured at 81, in the low, dull, normal range. Experts testified about her childhood sexual abuse, years of prostitution, and how trauma had damaged her beyond repair. They argued she was mentally unstable, that she couldn't fully distinguish between real threats and perceived ones. But it wasn't enough. The defense tried to introduce Richard Mallory's criminal history, his conviction for attempted rape, his decade in a facility for sex offenders. This could have supported Aileen's self-defense claim. The judge refused to allow it as evidence. On January 27, 1992, the jury found Aileen Wuornos guilty of murdering Richard Mallory. 4 days later, on January 31st, she was sentenced to death. It was the first of 6 death sentences she would receive. After the sentencing, Aileen turned to the prosecutor and hissed, "I hope your wife and children get raped." She made obscene gestures and screamed profanities at the jury. The woman who had been screaming for help her entire life was still screaming, but nobody was listening. On March 31, 1992, Aileen pleaded no contest to 3 more murders. In her statement to the court, she said something shocking. "I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me as I've told you, but these others did not. They only began to start to." Wait, let's stop and think about what she just said. She admitted that 6 of the 7 men didn't actually rape her. They only began to start to. What does that mean? Did they make advances? Did they say something threatening? Or did Aileen kill them before anything happened because she assumed what would come next? Was she killing in self-defense? Or was she killing in anticipation of violence that might never have occurred? By February 1993, Aileen had pleaded guilty to all the remaining murders, 6 death sentences, 6 different ways the state of Florida said she deserved to die. No charges were filed for Peter Seam's murder because his body was never found. The question remains, was this justice for 7 dead men? Or was this revenge on a broken woman who never had a chance? Aileen spent over 10 years on death row at Florida's Broward Correctional Institution. During that time, something inside her mind began to break apart completely. Her appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court was denied in 1996. In 2001, something shocking happened. Aileen filed a petition to the Florida Supreme Court asking to fire her lawyers and stop all appeals. She wrote, "I killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again too. There's no chance in keeping me alive because I'd kill again. I have hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this, she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again." Her attorneys argued she wasn't mentally competent to make that decision, but a court-appointed panel of psychiatrists examined her and agreed she was competent to drop her appeals. Long-term isolation on death row isn't just about waiting to die. It's a form of psychological torture that can fundamentally alter a person's mental state. Studies show that extended solitary confinement can cause hallucinations, paranoia, and complete mental breakdowns. By 2002, Aileen's mental state had deteriorated dramatically. She began accusing prison guards of poisoning her food with dirt, saliva, and urine. She claimed she overheard them discussing plans to push her to commit suicide before her execution. She said they wanted to rape her before she died. She complained about strip searches, tight handcuffs, guards kicking her door, constant window checks, low water pressure, mildew on her mattress. She threatened to boycott showers and meals when certain officers were on duty. In her final weeks, documentary filmmaker Nick Broomfield interviewed her. She talked about sonic pressure crushing her head and her mind being tortured at the prison. In her last interview, she turned on Broomfield himself, screaming, "You sabotaged my life, society, the cops, the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies." Her final words to the camera were simple. "Thanks a lot, society, for railroading me." Was she paranoid, delusional, or was there truth to her claims? We'll never know. What we do know is that the little girl who was abused, abandoned, and exploited had become a woman who believed the entire world was still out to hurt her. And maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. October 9th, 2002. The day of execution arrived. Aileen was offered a last meal, anything she wanted under $20. She declined. Instead, she asked for just a cup of coffee. At 9:30 a.m., prison officials strapped her to the gurney. The lethal injection began, drugs flowing into both of her arms. Witnesses reported that she turned toward them, made an odd face, almost like a smile, rolled her eyes and turned away. At 9:31, she shut her eyes. Her head jerked backward. At 9:32, her mouth dropped open, her eyes opened to slits. At 9:47 a.m., Aileen Carol Wuornos was pronounced dead. She was 46 years old. She became the 10th woman executed in the United States since the Supreme Court restored the death penalty in 1976, and only the 2nd woman executed in Florida. Before she died, Aileen had made one final request. She wanted a specific song played at her funeral, Carnival, by Natalie Merchant from the album Tiger Lily. Aileen had spent countless hours on death row listening to that album. When Natalie Merchant found out, she gave permission for the song to be used, saying, "If it gave her some solace, I have to be grateful." After her death, Aileen's body was cremated. Her childhood friend Dawn Botkins scattered her ashes beneath a tree in Michigan, the state where Aileen was born and where her nightmare first began. Aileen Wuornos died, but her story didn't end. In 2003, the film Monster was released, starring Charlize Theron as Aileen. Theron transformed herself completely for the role, gaining weight, wearing prosthetic teeth, capturing Aileen's mannerisms and pain. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Aileen Wuornos, the unwanted child, the abused girl, the failed wife, the desperate prostitute, the serial killer, became immortalized in Hollywood. Filmmaker Nick Broomfield made 2 documentaries about her. Her story inspired an opera, songs, books, and countless television episodes. The cultural fascination continues to this day. A new Netflix documentary about her life is scheduled for release later this year. But why? What is it about Aileen Wuornos that captures our collective attention? Maybe it's because her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about gender and violence, about how we treat abuse survivors, about whether our justice system actually serves justice, about whether some people are beyond saving. So let's come back to the question we started with. Was Aileen Wuornos a victim or a predator? Psychologists who examined her found clear evidence of severe trauma. Her childhood sexual abuse, years of prostitution, and untreated mental illness had damaged her beyond repair. She scored as a psychopath on diagnostic tests. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Her explosive temper and inability to maintain relationships were symptoms of deep psychological wounds. But here's the haunting question nobody can answer. Could this tragedy have been prevented? If someone had protected that little girl being sexually abused by her grandfather, would 7 men still be alive today? If the system hadn't failed her at every turn, if someone had intervened when she was trading sex for food at age 11, if someone had gotten her real help instead of just arresting her over and over, would Aileen Wuornos have become a killer? We'll never know. Prevention is always better than punishment. Every dollar we invest in protecting children, treating trauma, providing mental health services, and supporting abuse survivors is a dollar that could prevent the next tragedy. We can't save everyone, but we can save some, and we have to try. Here's what we do know. Aileen Wuornos was failed by everyone who should have protected her. Her parents, her grandparents, the school system, social services, the mental health system, the criminal justice system. Every safety net that should have caught her had holes in it. Does that excuse murder? No. Does it explain it? Maybe. 7 men are dead. 7 families were destroyed. That's real. That matters. But 1 little girl was destroyed long before she destroyed anyone else. That's also real. That also matters. Somewhere right now, there's a child being abused, a teenager being exploited, a young person with untreated mental illness who isn't getting help. If we don't act, if we don't intervene, if we don't create systems that protect the vulnerable instead of criminalizing them, we're setting the stage for the next tragedy. The question isn't just whether Aileen Wuornos was a monster. The question is, are we creating more? So here's what I want from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Aileen Wuornos deserved the death penalty? Could she have been rehabilitated? What should society do differently to prevent cases like this? If this video made you think, if it challenged your perspective on crime and punishment, on victims and perpetrators, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to Dark Justice Files for more true crime stories that don't just entertain. They educate. Stories that make you think about the systems we've built and the lives we could save. Because sometimes the line between victim and perpetrator isn't as clear as we'd like it to be. And that's what makes these stories worth telling. Next time on Dark Justice Files, a charming businessman, a string of missing women, and a barrel buried in the backyard that would expose one of the most calculated killers in American history. When police finally caught him, he had murdered at least 30 women, maybe more, and he had been hiding in plain sight for decades. This is the story of the man they called the Killer Clown, and how one detective's refusal to give up brought him down. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it.